I'm Brian Urick, Chief of Staff, Vice President of External Affairs here at Congressional University. On behalf of our President, Don Taylor, welcome and thank you for attending tonight's event. Cabrini is based on 3 principles: academic excellence, leadership development, and a commitment to social justice. Leadership development is something that we take very to our core here as a part of our mission, and the ability to try to work with young students on the philosophy and the theory behind critical thinking in terms of listening to an issue, hearing both sides of the issue, taking a step back, and then trying to understand the other point of view, regardless of how passionate you are about that subject. While it's okay to disagree, we try to emphasize it's not okay to be disagreeable. So we ask kindly tonight, we know that some of the subjects that we probably will talk about is a very source of passion for a lot of folks here, but we hope that you will remain civil and there won't be any type of outburst in the crowd. Other than that, I am more than happy to introduce Olivia Thorne from, I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm at right now. Olivia Thorne from the League of Women Voters. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you for coming to our candidates forum tonight. The League welcomes this opportunity to learn more about all of our Democratic candidates running for the newly formed 5th Congressional District, and hear, as Brian said, a civil discussion regarding these important issues. There's a note on the table outside, and I want to make sure you're aware that candidates Dan Muroff, David Wertheim withdrew after the official deadline for withdrawals, which means their names will appear on the ballot. But it means if you vote for the name on the ballot, it will not be counted. The only way their name could be counted is if they were a write-in. And all the legal hoo-ha that goes with it is sitting outside on the table, just outside the door. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, which means we neither support or oppose candidates. We encourage informed and active participation of citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to women and men who are 16 years or older, and there are membership forms outside for both Radnor and for everybody else. And we will make sure it gets to the right person if you grab the wrong form. But we would love to have you become members. I think I have to add here that I got several emails asking whether men could come tonight because it said League of Women Voters. Hence the reason I'm mentioning this about we do welcome men. We've had men since '74 as members. We have members of men on our boards and at all levels of the league. And so, you know, we're happy all the men who braved it tonight and came out. And this, Cabrini College is videoing the forum and it will be available online by this weekend. You can go to any of the county league websites. If you just Google League of Women Voters, Delaware County, you'll find the different league websites, and it should be there. I know it will be on LWV-CDC.org only because I'm the webmaster and I'll be the one putting it up. So you know. But the other thing is that I do want to mention Vote 411, and there are cards outside like this as well. Vote 411 is an online voter's guide, and I believe all the candidates have participated, and we thank you very much for that. And it's another way that you can compare candidates and what they're thinking, and we hope you will take advantage of that. And now I'd like to introduce the most important person tonight, Jennifer Levy-Tatum, who's president of the Chester County League and will be our moderator, and she'll explain all the rules.
Good evening, everyone. I am very happy to be here to assist the Delaware County League of Women Voters with this forum tonight. But I must admit that I am somewhat daunted by the number of candidates. We've had to adjust our rules somewhat in order to be able to make sure that this is a fair forum and that people do, in fact, get sufficient time to express their position. Now, I do have a few rules general rules, that I must read to you because these are League of Women Voters rules that are across the board with every forum that we conduct. All cell phones.
Is that a runaway?
All cell phones must be put on silent during the forum. No banners or balloons. So if you inadvertently brought a campaign sign into the room, I would ask that you turn it down. I am not going to ask that you take off any T-shirts that you might be wearing. Now, if you do have campaign material, I believe we have tables on the outside where you can actually place those materials and have our attendees take them up as they see fit. Now, regarding the actual rules for tonight's forum, with so many different candidates, I know people are trying over there to see me as I am trying to see you. All right, so we'll start with who are these people anyhow? Well, I can only see the reverse of the signs and just barely, but Greg Vitale is A, Mr. Vitale. Molly Sheehan, B. Teresa Wright, C. Teresa. Mary Gay Scanlon. Rich Laser. Not here. Okay, so I need to.
Teresa.
I'm at F then.
Yes, you are.
Larry, Mr. How do you pronounce your last name?
Arata.
Arata. Larry Arata. Now, I did speak with Ms. Lunkenheimer before in order to be able to pronounce her name. So Ashley Lunkenheimer is G. Margot Davidson. Lindy Lee. And we are missing Thaddeus Kirkland as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, opening statements. I'm just going to run down the list so you'll know what's coming. Opening statements by the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 1/2 minutes to do their opening statement. Where is my timer? Right. So candidates, you're going to be focusing on the timer even while you're trying to remember what it is that you want to say. All right? Then we're going to ask the candidates to describe their background and experience, and also to focus on how they would distinguish themselves. Since we have 10 people, is it 10 that we have, or is it just 9? 8. Since we have 8 people here tonight, we want to be sure that we understand the difference between you. Okay. So the candidates have drawn their order of speaking. The next thing that we're going to ask them to do is answer the question, what are your 3 priorities? And that will be another 1 1/2 minutes. Then we have some yes-no questions. Candidates, can you show us your yes-no so we know you have them? Right, we have some yes-no questions. The candidates are seated in the order that was drawn at a meeting, a preliminary meeting that we had last week. And then they will make their closing statements in the reverse order. Okay? So, opening statements. According to my list, we should have been starting with Mr. Kirkland.
Well, we're not going to do that.
Backwards? That's right, he's not A. So we're going to be starting with A, Mr. Vitale.
Okay. Is this working? Is this about the right length? Good to see you guys. My name's Greg Vitale. I've devoted my life to environmental protection. I've served in the State House for the past 25 years. I've been on the Environmental Committee for 24 of those years, chairman as 4. What I will do when I get to Washington, I have a fairly precise idea of what I want to do and how I want to do it. I want to work on environment. I want to get up in the morning and think about what I can do to protect the environment. As Barack Obama has said many times, climate change is the worst long-term threat to this planet, and it's being totally ignored by Congress, and Donald Trump is doing worse. He pulled us back from the Paris Accords, rolling back the Clean Power Plan, rolling back CAFE standards, drilling across our outer continental shelf. There needs to be a voice for environmental protection in Washington. I want to be that voice. I know how the system works. I've been in the legislature. I know how it works. I know how my personality, such as it is, figures into that. So that's what I want to do, and appreciate your support. Thanks.
Mr. Vitale, how would you distinguish yourself from the rest of the candidates?
Are we
One
gonna,
second.
I'm sorry. Are we going to go the whole thing? Is that what you really want to?
I just want you to give me in one sentence how you would distinguish yourself from the rest of the candidates.
I don't think anyone knows as much about environmental policy or about the legislative process as I do. I have done this job. My work has been recognized by objective measures, by almost every major environmental group in the state. I am viewed as a serious legislator, a hardworking legislator. So I know precisely what I want to do and how I'm going to do it. So
Thank you, Mr. Vitale. That was more than one sentence, but I've got it. Thank you. Next would be Ms. Sheehan.
Since this one's on a, yeah. Is this okay? You guys can hear it? Okay. Yeah.
Use Greg's.
My name is Molly Sheehan. I am a scientist at the University of Pennsylvania. I develop new tools for advancing cancer therapies, and I've wanted to do this my entire life, since middle school. And I worked hard to get here. I worked many jobs in high school and college. I put myself through Haverford College down the road and got my PhD from Penn. And I've been really involved in my community for a long time. I am a founding member of a task force that built a Mandarin immersion program in a South Philadelphia brick and mortar public school. I've served on boards to advocate for students' rights with the administration at the University of Pennsylvania. And I've negotiated group health insurance for a group of 24,000 Southeastern Pennsylvanians. But in 2016, I was shook. People felt emboldened to say things to my family about my husband being an immigrant, about us having a biracial family that I really thought we had gotten past. I couldn't believe people were saying things to my 2-year-old. And when Trump won, honestly, I went in and I sobbed next to my daughter's crib because ingrained in my head was that tape of Trump bragging about sexually assaulting women. And the thought of, how did we get here? How do we get to a place where in her most formidable years, we have a misogynist, a bigot, a xenophobe, someone that thinks that her father is lesser than, and that she, can be objectified in the White House. And it's because we haven't been doing a good enough job on our side either. Is that the end? No. Okay. That we hadn't been doing a good enough job on our side either, and that we needed a strong, progressive message. And so I decided to run a year ago to take out Pat Meehan, and now I'm running today to bring this progressive vision to the new 5th District. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Wright. I am running for Congress in the 5th Congressional District. I am an accountant for 15 years. I'm self-employed, and I currently manage and oversee about $6 million a year through my accounting company. I started off as a teen mom. I have one of my daughters here who actually oversees one of the nonprofit organizations entitled the Youth Empowerment Summit that's centered towards the advancement of the youth, a program that I self-funded on a $50,000 a year salary. I am running because of the recent tax reform. I've worked in ground zero, helping small businesses and corporations stay afloat even through the recession. And once Donald Trump released that new tax reform, I said, oh crap, we need to go in there and do something because right now we're in trouble. So I'm running to make sure that our tax laws are equally structured and fair for everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. And now Ms. Scanlon.
Good evening. My name's Mary Gay Scanlon.
I grew up in upstate New York in a rural area. My dad was a Marine who went to college on the GI Bill, and my mom was a public school teacher. My dad then went to law school, and his first job out of law school was to work in the Kennedy White House. Very low-level position, but he worked in the Kennedy White House. And then he went back home to upstate New York, and he worked for Bobby Kennedy. So I came down to Philadelphia for law school, went to UPenn, but I brought with me the view that government is supposed to help people, not corporations and not the NRA. And that's how I've built my career. I've been a public interest lawyer in Philadelphia for 35 years. I started volunteering for abused and neglected children right out of law school. I moved to the Education Law Center of Pennsylvania, where I've represented parents and families in each one of the 18 school districts that makes up the new 5th Congressional District. So from the most challenged districts of Chester Upland and Philadelphia all the way to the best districts, Wallingford, Swarthmore, where I was on the school board, and Lower Merion. So I have worked throughout the district. For the last 15 years, I've been leading the free legal services program at a national law firm, Ballard Spahr, where our focus is on representing low-income individuals and on civil rights. So I've done a lot of work with respect to voting rights. Recently, a lot of work involving immigrants under threat of deportation, even some research involving standing in emoluments case. So the work I've been doing is the same work that's being challenged by this administration, and it's simply time to take that work to Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Arata.
Good evening. Thank you for the League of Women Voters and Cabrini College for having us. It's great to be back at Cabrini, where from 2002 to 2006, I worked at night to get my master's in education to start my second career as a public school teacher. I went to Haverford High School. I'll get back to that in a second. I went to Haverford High School, grew up in Havertown, went to Princeton University, played football there, majored in politics, and then spent 20 years selling software. But every bump in my career in software through the 80s and 90s, I thought about becoming a teacher. And 15 years ago, my mom had stage 4 cancer. She said, if that's what you always wanted to do, if that's what you always thought God wanted you to do, you should do it, because none of us is guaranteed tomorrow. So I sat down with my wife, who was here, and we figured out a way I could take a $100,000 pay cut and become a public school teacher and spend substantial dollars for a Cabrini Master's in Education and become a public school teacher. And I decided to teach in Philadelphia because that's where help was needed most. So for the past 15 years, I've taught history and English, and I've coached football and wrestling in city schools. During those 20 years, I was also very active in the environment, fought against the Chester incinerator, fought against an ash dump in Haverford Township and Upper Darby Township border, fought to keep the open space at the Haverford State Hospital grounds, and many other grassroots environmental concerns. And then 4 months ago, almost 5 months ago, my wife and I lost our son to a heroin overdose, and we started the Opioid Crisis Action Network to get long-term care, which is best practices for the addicted, and to make insurance companies and the government pay for it.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. Ms. Lunkenheimer.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ashley Lunkenheimer. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I was raised by a father who was a litigator and a mother who was active in the community her entire career. And so the combination led me to know, because my father made me litigate my entire childhood, that I was destined to be a lawyer. But the side of me that was raised by my mother made me want to get a social work degree before I went to law school. And I did do that so that I could assess in a broader way what was happening. And nobody with a legal issue doesn't have something else going on, often where our community has failed. So I went to social work school, advocated for children in foster care, as well as individuals who had been involuntarily institutionalized for mental health issues, and then went on to law school. I ultimately went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I spent almost a decade protecting seniors from fraud, fighting the opioid epidemic long before it was known as an epidemic, taking the guns that we're seeing, unfortunately, so often on TV, the AR-15, Tech-9, Romarm, AK-47s, off the streets and out of the hands of violent criminals. And recognizing as someone trained as a social worker that there are limitations to our criminal justice system. It has a very specific remedy. I ended up ultimately going into Medicaid and Medicare services, trying to expand in this Commonwealth healthcare services so that we think more broadly about how to keep you're on Medicaid, Medicare seniors in our communities longer, not just with a doctor's script, but other things. And the reason I got involved in this race is a large part because I saw the degradation of the Department of Justice justice that I had been so proud to work for under President Obama, including the Attorney General's failure to enforce voter rights laws. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity tonight to speak on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lunkenheimer. Ms. Davidson.
I'm Margot Davidson, and I'm running for Congress. There's actually very few of us here tonight. We started out at 16. We're now down to 8, so you're treated to the 8 of us. Sometimes I'm referred to as the breaker of chains because I have broken the chains and barriers in many areas of my life. I've spent my entire life in public service in 3 separate and distinct phases. First, as a broadcast journalist, where my mission was the truth. And I was breaking chains and barriers of false information and lies and false images about the community that I reported on, and holding politicians accountable as a broadcast journalist in this area. In the late 1980s, the crack cocaine hit the city of Philadelphia in a very real way. And I recognized that sometimes people need more than information. They need direct service. And so I started a nonprofit organization to help children whose parents were addicted to drugs. And that organization still works and thrives in Philadelphia today. And so I broke the chains of addiction for the crack cocaine epidemic. Those strategies still work as we address the opioid crisis. And then when Barack Obama ran for president, I got back involved in politics. And I broke the back of the Republican Party to become the first Democrat, the first African American, and the first woman to be elected to my seat in the State House. I am the only experienced female legislator on this stage. I have 8 years of experience in the Pennsylvania legislature, and I have been at the forefront of every significant legislative progress that we've made since we've been in the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. And now we have Ms. Lee.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lindy Lee, and I grew up in Radnor. I actually went to the Agnes Stern School on academic scholarship despite being late to the entrance exam. I still remember it so clearly. I'm a first-generation American, and Cabrini College is actually a really special place to me because it was here that I decided to take the entrance exam. My family's, we just weren't able to afford it, so I tested for the scholarship. And it was here at this very school that someone encouraged me to do so, and thus changing the trajectory of my life. And to go from a girl sitting in the nosebleed seats to now being a congressional candidate who is endorsed by the daughter of Robert F. Kennedy is a testament to the enduring strength of the American dream. Only in America could this trajectory be possible. And I'm running for Congress so that you and your family can live your own version of the American dream. Right now I work in cancer research. Did you know that 20% of all Americans will get cancer at some point in their lives? We have a government and a president that's cutting funding for the National Institutes of Health and other scientific research. It's so short-sighted. No one can escape this. You know, I truly believe we need a new generation of leadership, someone who understands the burden and the albatross of $1.5 trillion of student loan debt. And it's not just the students that are impacted, it's the families that are trying to help put their kids through school. You know, we should be doing everything we can to help our children rather than burdening them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. And now we have a double-barrel question here. What are your 3 priorities? So keep that in mind, 3 priorities. And what would be your choice of a committee in the House? 1.5 minutes per candidate, same order as before. So we would start with Mr. Vitale.
Yes, the mic
down here.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, we've covered the environment, so that would obviously be my tough first priority. But I mean, one thing you have to understand about the real world of legislating, I've been doing it for a long time, there's something called intellectual bandwidth and political capital. And you have to understand that, you know, to come up to say you're going to do 10 different things, it just doesn't work. So I'm going to get up every morning and work very hard on environmental protection. But also related to that are 2 other things. One is the corruptive influence of money in politics. And some of you may be aware of the continuing report I've put out there, Marcellus Money in the Pennsylvania legislature, which really chronicles the obscene spending, the lobbyist spending, and money given to state legislators. I mean, I put right out there that Senator Scarnati, one of the most powerful people in Harrisburg, has gotten $500,000 from the drilling industry over the past 10 years. The third thing is military spending. I mean, we have a $700 billion military budget. We spend way too much on our U.S. military. We're overly involved in the world. We needlessly annoy other countries. And the relationship to the other two issues is this. We have our military assets spread out over the greater Middle East to protect the free flow of oil to the United States. We wouldn't need such a huge military if we weren't so dependent on fossil fuel. So the three issues I would prioritize again: the environmental protection, corruptive influence of money, and our U.S. military.
And what would be your choice of committee in the House?
You know, that's a good question, because the Environmental Committee apparently is very much interrelated to the Commerce Committee for reasons I haven't quite figured out yet. But it would be.
Thank you, Mr. Vitale. Ms. Sheehan?
So my number one priority would be campaign finance reform. So many of the issues that we face today are because of the corrupting influence of money. It's because super PACs can spend unlimited amounts of money. Groups like the NRA have unlimited control over the people on the other side of the aisle. It's the reason we don't have the gun reforms most people want. It's the reasons we don't have single-payer health care. It's the reason we don't have equitable public school funding. It's the corrupting forces of the corporations that are essentially making corporate welfare through our tax dollars and through our children's lives with our political system, by lobbying, by paying for campaigns. And so I would push for public campaign financing and an overturning of Citizens United. On issues, the thing I have the most experience with is healthcare, and I will push for single-payer universal healthcare. I think we need to commit to it now, but it needs to be implemented carefully. I've worked in the system, I've negotiated group health insurance plans, and I do medical research. I understand also that a lot of inequities that we see in our healthcare system start from the first day of research. For example, women are not properly studied. And that's something we can do on the committee I want to be on, which is science, space, and technology. Because we'll have a Republican in the White House for the next 2 years, a lot of the reforms we can do to improve efficiencies of care are through the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. It's with NIH funding. It's the way we do research. It's how we make sure medicines work for women. And the third thing I will work on is early childhood education and public education funding. Because education begins day one with paid maternity and paternity leave, childcare subsidies that track with the actual cost of childcare, and universal federally funded pre-K and after-school care.
Thank you, Ms. Shen. You get the prize for, for being able to put a whole lot into 1.5 minutes. Ms. Wright.
Yes. My main priority, well, my mom always told me to stick to what I know, which is taxes. I understand tax. I read the tax code. At age 19, I don't know why I decided to do that, but it was interesting, and I'm like, oh, this is not fair. This is not fair. So I started to work in tax. So I would definitely want to go in and reform the reformation of that broken tax system that we're working on. That's my main priority. The next priority would be economic and workforce environment, because without a proper tax reform, without our funds being properly allocated, there's no economic or workforce affairs, there's no money for education. So I need to work on a top priority, which is allocating our tax dollars fairly. 80% of the government income consists of our income tax and payroll tax. And now, since the small businesses are paying more tax, the government is actually receiving more money from the small businesses. Therefore, they should receive more tax incentives. And individuals as well, where we will be paying more taxes. So I will be fighting to reform that tax reform. I would love to work on the education reform as well, because our education is definitely being, well, my children's education is being underfunded right now. So it will be the tax reform, budget and economic affairs, and the education system. Thank you.
And your choice of committee?
It would be within the tax reform, budget and economic workforce, and education.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Ms. Scanlon.
So my three priorities would be, number one, the rule of law, which has been seriously undermined by this administration. Number two, voting rights. And number three, education. So I mentioned at the outset that my worldview is that the highest purpose of government is to help people. Okay, but we've seen under this administration, our federal government has really gone from being an ally to an adversary. And I think the first job of Congress is to fulfill its constitutional responsibility to act as a check and balance, whether it's on issues involving the power to bomb, the power of war, who should be making those decisions, or whether it's, ultimately it could be impeachment, but holding the administration's feet to the fire, making sure the government ethics rules are observed, making sure that our constitutional system works. The second thing is voting rights. Greg mentioned that you can't do everything. I work with a group of national legal coordinators who, in the wake of the 2016 election, decided we had to divide up in order to fight the many threats to democracy and progress that have been made over recent years. So I've been co-chairing a national task force on voting rights and working hand in hand with the Obama administration, not so much with the Sessions administration, to protect voting rights around the country, to oppose voter suppression measures such as gerrymandering and strict voter ID laws, to work on things like campaign finance reform, because you can't overturn Citizen United. It's a constitutional issue. It would require an amendment, not overturning. And the last thing is education. I've worked in public education my entire life. And the committee I would choose would be the judiciary, mostly because that's where the voting rights bills originate, but also because that's where impeachment might originate.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Arata.
My top three priorities would be providing, as I said before, equitable services for the mentally ill and the addicted to the medical surgical patients. There is an Equity and Parity Act that was passed in 2008. It's a federal law. Apparently has a lot of loopholes, or it's not being enforced. There is a state accompanied act called Act 106, and apparently it's not being enforced, or it has loopholes in it as well, because when you say you get best practices, the mentally ill, you get best practices paid for by your health insurance company. That's the law. And then you have to face a 7-day review, and your provider has to fight tooth and nail every 7 days to justify giving you additional services for the treatment that you need. And then discharges are often forced after 7 days or 14 days or 21 days, when everybody in the medical community knows that if you're addicted, you're suffering from addiction, you're not going to reach recovery after 7 days or 14 days or 21 days. So this is criminal. They're breaking the letter of the law, and I think at the very least the spirit of the law, which is parity for health care for the mentally ill with the medical surgical. My second priority as a public school teacher, I care about equity in public school funding. We should have equal funding from Chester to Radnor, from South Philadelphia to Haverford. I benefited from a fully funded school district in Haverford. My children went to the Haverford Public School District. The children that I teach in Philadelphia, they suffer from being in schools that are terribly underfunded. All 15 years I've been a public school teacher in Philadelphia, the schools have been terribly underfunded. My third priority is the environment. The Clean Water Act has to be enforced. The Clean Water Act has to be enforced, and we need to lead on climate change. The committee I'd like to be on is Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. Ms. Lunkenheimer.
You're really getting good at that. Thank you. So I think that it's not rocket science. The two greatest tools we have to keep our communities safe and healthy are healthcare and education. And when I was working in Medicaid, Medicare services, we were being innovative and thoughtful about how to expand those services. And then I saw Medicaid expansion being cut. When you take 13 million people off the rolls, it's not an exaggeration to say that people will die. And also, we should not be bargaining using CHIP versus DACA. The idea that we would negotiate for our children's health care is a really scary one, and something that should be fought against with a lot of energy and experience. I also, education, I was the chair of a Montessori pre-K program, and my children heard 40 million more words before they went to kindergarten than other kids, because they had that opportunity. And just the exponential setbacks that those kids have who don't have that same opportunity just based on the income of their parents is is absolutely unfair. I think for the third part, following from those two things is jobs. But right now, I think there's an important opportunity in the area of gun safety. I think we have a moment where a Republican governor of Florida actually raised age limits, maybe to save his own seat. But we have an amazing opportunity, thanks to the voice of our youth, to actually accomplish sensible gun laws. And same with the opioid epidemic, and trying to work together to solve that, because that's a red state and blue state. It's a human problem, and we need to work hard to solve that. The committee I would like to be on, if given the opportunity, I realize it would be very junior, is the Ways and Means Committee, because that's where healthcare innovations start out of. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lunkenheimer. And now Ms. Davidson.
Justice, justice, justice. The people cry out for justice. And what I've been fighting for in my career, my whole career, and in my life in the legislature, is economic justice, first and foremost, because it affects everything. It affects where you're educated. It affects your health care. It affects infrastructure spending. It affects environmental justice. Who gets lead in their water? Who gets lead taken out? All of those things affect our families, whether it's elder care. Each of us is one illness, a childhood illness, or a parent's illness, or dementia, or Alzheimer's, or opioid addiction, away from poverty, away from spending everything we have in order to get the care that we need. And so those are the things that I will be fighting for. Educational equity. In a public school system, why is it that poor and moderate income neighborhoods have the least amount of resources in order to educate the children that have the greatest trauma? And so those are the things I'll be fighting for, including criminal justice and gun reform. But it's really about justice, starting with economic justice. And so I want to serve on the Ways and Means Committee and Appropriations, because budgets tell us what our values are and where we'll spend our money and how we spend our money and who it affects and how it affects them.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Ms. Lee?
I'm running for Congress to protect Social Security and for Medicare for all. I think it's a bit of a misnomer. Social Security is not actually an entitlement. It's your money. You've been paying into the system all your life, and you deserve to get those checks back. On the current trajectory, we're going to run out of money by 2034, so I'm not going to see anything. That row of people won't see anything. I want to make sure that you will. Yes, shout out to you. And number two, I decided to run for Congress on December 14, 2012, the day of Sandy Hook. It's become, I'm so sick and tired of waiting for someone else to get the job done. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. If we're not going to get the job done, no one else will. We need universal background checks, restrictions on high-capacity magazines, and a ban on assault weapons. And yes, we talk about all these mass shootings, Parkland, Las Vegas, Aurora, Parkland, the list is endless. But what about the daily shootings that we encounter in South Philadelphia and around Delaware County? What about those families? What about the 89 Americans who die every single day to gun violence? What about those lives and the families that they leave behind? Also, campaign finance reform is an overarching issue. Until we get at the rot of the system, we won't get anything else done. We've institutionalized bribery in this country, and pay-to-play exists in the Democratic Party as well. We have to end that. We cannot buy our politicians. I want to do something about gun violence, but the NRA is in the way. I want to do something about climate change, but Big Oil and ExxonMobil are in the way.
Thank you.
Appropriations.
I was just about to ask. Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee. Now, the audience, you have to take note. We're on to these yes and no questions. Nobody in the league is actually going to be keeping score. So you have to keep score, okay? Keep track of what these people say regarding these questions. So here's the first one, yes or no question. Question number one. Will you commit to holding town hall meetings at least once a year?
Yeah, only once?
Is everybody saying yes over there? Okay.
Somebody said two.
Question number two. Do you support a ban on semi-automatic weapons? Let me finish a question, guys. Semi-automatic weapons and large capacity magazines.
Yes.
Do you support a ban?
Yes.
Are you keeping score? Number 3, do you support a path to citizenship for dreamers? Everybody's still saying yes, huh? Well, I am going to give you one that you're supposed to say, to give me the truth about. All right. Did you see the Villanova parade?
Yeah, which year?
That's right.
This year's Villanova
Saw the championship
parade.
game both times.
So, are they all saying yes? No. No. Okay, great. Uh-huh. Sorry. Well, all right then. Let's try the Eagles.
Oh, absolutely.
Wait. Are you an Eagles fan?
Yeah.
We don't have a waffle for this forum.
So what are they saying over there, audience?
Yes.
Everybody?
9.5.
9.5, okay. All right, now, so back to the serious stuff. Do you believe science has determined global warming is real? All yes? How about this one? Do you support a $15 federal minimum wage?
Sure.
Not sure? Okay.
Not immediately.
All right.
Gradual scale.
How about this? Do you support campaign finance reform?
There you go.
Everybody? And finally, candidates, if you do not win the Democratic primary, will you put your full support behind the Democratic candidate? All right. Thank you very much. Now we have some questions from the audience. Do we have all the questions? All right.
Were you making equipment?
All right.
She did.
Okay.
I'm trying to be.
This is going to be a little tricky. Let me make sure I have the right order. Question number 1 goes to candidates A, B, and C. Are candidates A, B, and C here?
Yes.
All right. Question number 1. Will you support, and now I'll call you so you can, are these yes/no questions or?
Yes or no, then you can do everybody.
On the cards.
Right, they're on the cards. How much time do they have to answer?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. So candidates A, B, C, will you support efforts to end partisan gerrymandering so that voters pick candidates rather than candidates choosing voters? A, Mr. A, Mr. A.
Vitale.
Mr. Vitale.
Yeah, no, of course. I was co-sponsor of House Bill 722, the Samuelson bill, which created a citizens commission for drawing districts. I mean, the 7th Congressional District was the poster child for why we need political gerrymandering. It essentially made that seat unwinnable. So of course, I would support that. Yeah, I would, and I have.
And Ms. B, Molly.
Yes, I would. I would not support gerrymandering. I would support independent commissions, like have been proposed, so that we can get independent, non-politicians drawing the lines, because it really is about communities. I think I'm the only person at the stage now that was running in the 7th Congressional District before the redrawing, and I can tell you it was not fair. It was not about communities. And we would drive to Berks County and drive in and out of the 7th District 3 or 4 times. And people in Clifton Heights have very little in common with the people north of Reading. And this really is about communities. People ask me when it got redrawn, how is this for your campaign? And I tell them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it is for my campaign. It's not about me. It's about you. It's about you as a community being able to voice your community's needs to your elected representatives. So I would absolutely support independent redistricting that's based based in the communities and comes from the people, not from the politicians, because the power should always emanate from you, not from us.
And Ms. C, that would be Teresa.
Yes, I would support the ending of gerrymandering, unless, of course, the world is going to grow bigger than it would, it normally is, but it's not. It's just a matter of growing in people. So we do need to keep it structured, as well as understanding that someone who's going to represent the district would be the person that will have to understand and learn about it, as opposed to just switching districts. It's like jumping into a new job. So I would support just ending it. I did sign a petition as well today.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Now, the next question is supposed to go to candidates D, E, and F, but candidate E is not here. So we will do candidates D and F. Question is, if elected, will you make it a priority to seek new Democratic Party leadership in the House? And that would be Ms. Scanlon.
So this appears to be a favorite question for panels and newspapers these days. I'm not sure that it's going to be the job of the junior members of Congress to seek new leadership, although obviously we'll get a vote. I have a lot of respect for the current leadership. They've certainly done a lot. I guess it's going to depend again on whether we're successful in having a blue wave or whether the Republicans end up keeping control. But typically the question is, would you support Nancy Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House again? I think that's a decision that has to wait until we get there and see what happens. As I said, she's done a great job. She's accomplished a lot, but we'll need to see who is running for that job at that time.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Arata, this is also your question.
That's a tough question. I do have a lot of respect for Nancy Pelosi. I have a lot of memories of things that she has accomplished. The biggest memory, I think, is when the party was somewhat divided on the ACA, and of course the Republicans were in lockstep against it, and President Obama wasn't sure whether he should go for the whole bill or settle for half a loaf, and Nancy Pelosi assured him to hold on tight, that she would get the votes and unify the party in the Congress, and she did it. She came through and she did what she said she was going to do, and we have the ACA as it is. So I do have fond memories and respect for her. On the other hand, it's a long time that she's been at the helm, and I think it is time for a new generation of leadership, a new face, a new voice of the party. So I'd probably be leaning in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. And now this next question, number 3, would be going to Ms. Lunkenheimer, Ms. Davidson, and Ms. Lee. And here's the question. Would you support removing the cap on the Social Security portions of the payroll tax?
Yes, I would. I do think that Social Security is the greatest anti-poverty measure we have in our country, and I think it's under attack. Paul Ryan, although luckily for all of us, he will be departing Congress. Unluckily for my commercial, which was already filmed before I made that important edit, he's made it clear that he and the other leadership want to cut Social Security and Medicare to try to pay for that horrible tax bill. I think we not only need to protect Social Security, but we need to work very hard to make sure that it's there for Lindy. I know you didn't say how old we all are, but I'm 25 today. But it should be there for future generations. It's just such an important part of making sure people are safe and healthy and able to live full lives. So I absolutely would. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lunkenheimer. Ms. Davidson?
Yes, as the economic justice candidate, of course, I would raise the cap. I mean, Social Security and Medicaid is really keeping people out of dire poverty. And so we need to be able to have retirement security in this country. It's very important as baby boomers are aging. The next largest generation in terms of populace is the millennials. And so this generation of baby boomers that are in the category of being senior citizens and being entitled to Social Security, they need to have the resources that they have earned their entire life. And so I think that it's very important that we provide them with every opportunity to have access to the money that they've earned and without a cap. Thank you.
Ms. Lee?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, Social Security is one of the major reasons why I'm running. And not only raising the cap, but also ending the way that we calculate inflation. It should not be chained CPI, which will lower the amount that you receive on a monthly basis. And I'm a Democrat because I believe that the government has a positive role to play in our lives to help us weather through the vicissitudes, unexpected occurrences that every single one of us experiences. You know, you should not have to suffer alone because you got sick or you got injured on a job. The government is supposed to provide that safety net, and it goes back to the days of FDR. Why are we dismantling this?
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Now, our next question, question number 4, should be going to candidates J, A, and B, but candidate J is not here, so this is for candidates A and B. Mr. Vitale, do you think that single payer is a desirable way to reform our healthcare system?
Just being resourceful.
I mean,
You guys keep that one down here. We've got here.
I mean,
we have 2.
in general, in very broad terms, I think my approach when I get to Washington, if I get to Washington and don't claim to be an expert on healthcare, will be first support and trying to improve the Affordable Care Act in the short term. But in the long term, working with other progressives to have a system, a Medicare for all system, a single payer Medicare for all system. That would be my approach, working with people who know a lot more than I do about the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Vitale. Ms. Sheehan?
Healthcare is a human right, and so it is a moral imperative that we make sure there is never a financial barrier between anybody and accessing the health care they need. The fiscally responsible way of doing that is single payer health care. We can't just flick a switch on it. It's going to take some planning. It's going to we have to be careful to make sure that the most marginalized populations don't get exploited by a system and we don't inherit the biases and inequities of the system. But I absolutely think we need to commit to single payer now. The government currently spends 64%, the federal government, of all healthcare costs in the United States, when you count tax subsidies and things like that. And we have an incredibly inefficient system that pushes money into corporations. We can actually get a better plan with better equity by moving to single payer. Every other Western country can do it, and we can. But I will say, I think that we need progressive control of all 3 branches, both houses and the federal government, to move to it so that we can repeal the Hyde Amendment first, so that moving to single payer will not cut women off of the full spectrum of reproductive health services.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. Now, question number 5 is supposed to go to candidates C, D, and E, but candidate E is not here, so we will have candidates C and D, being Ms. Wright and Ms. Scanlon. The question is, we are experiencing serious changes to the coastlines of our country. Should the federal government begin to build ocean barriers around coastal cities, or plan for moving populations away? Ms. Wright?
That is a very difficult question for me. So I am going to pass on to Ms. Scanlon because I have to do a lot more research before I answer something like that.
Ms. Scanlon?
That's a difficult question, period. So if the options are building barriers or moving people, I mean, I think we're going to be in a position where we have to do both. The way that oceans are rising, it affects different areas in different ways. There's going to have to be a variety of responses depending upon the area of the country. But I think first and foremost, we have to claw back a government that acknowledges that climate change is real and tries to head off those issues in the first place.
Thank you. Question number 6 goes to candidates F, G, and H. And the question is, would you encourage free college or trade schools to people displaced from declining industries? Mr. Arata.
Yes.
Short and sweet.
I think we need to reinvest, and part of your question was trade schools, we need to reinvest in trade training and trade schools. We have a situation where we need to invest in rebuilding our infrastructure, much of which was built in the 1950s, and we have to rebuild our roads, rebuild our bridges and tunnels and ports and so forth, and we don't have the people power that's well trained to do it because we've divested from trades education. My son would have benefited from learning a trade. Not everyone is cut out for college. So we need to make sure that people are ready to staff those jobs, to rebuild our infrastructure, and to take advantage of higher paying jobs and good union jobs. So the trade education is absolutely necessary. If Georgia can invest in people with a B average, their citizens with a B average, to go to the state school for free, why can't every state in the nation do that? We can invest to make, at the very least, community colleges free. My wife and I and my daughter are shouldering about $100,000 in student loan debt for our daughter who went to college. That's just crushing to our family, a middle-class family, and I think we cannot crush middle-class families in our nation.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. Ms. Lunkenheimer?
Absolutely. I think that we have a responsibility to help make sure that those whose industries are changing, that are declining, we want to have them, and we want to encourage people to re-enter the workforce in a different way. We have incredible opportunity in this district right now. We have two things. One, the environmental issues are very important, and there's one of the largest job growth sectors in the nation right now is renewable energy, and there are good union jobs and training that can come in that area, and solar panel installers, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is really an opportunity for this particular community that is struggling so much with also figuring out the right way to support our environment. And then the second part is healthcare services and healthcare related services is the largest industry, I believe, in terms of job growth in this area. And so there's such a variety of jobs, and as we work to rethink our healthcare system and to improve our healthcare system, there's a tremendous opportunity to train people in various areas in the healthcare service industry so that they can also hold the jobs they need to support their families the way we all want to support our families. Thank you.
Ms. Davidson?
Of course we should do this, and we can do this. We need to just end corporate welfare, and folks that have been trained earn exponentially more than folks that have not been trained in a post-secondary education. So whether it's trade school or it's community college or it's a four-year institution, we need to be able to train people for the jobs of the future. And they need to be able to do that without overwhelming, crushing debt that they face immediately after coming out of college. And we have the money in our budget to do that. That's why I want to be on the Ways and Means committee or the Appropriations Committee so we can see how we can reallocate the funds that are in our budget. $1 trillion alone is spent in agriculture. How can we use those dollars to train people for the jobs of the future, growth industries, and to make sure that they don't have crushing debt that stifles our economy? They can give back to the economy once they're trained for the jobs of the future.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Question number 7 is to go to candidates I, J, and A. Candidate J is not here, so we have candidates I and A. Ms. Lee, this begins with you. If you are the candidate for the Democratic Party, how will you unite the party and at the same time build a majority of the voters in your district?
I don't take part in any negative campaigning. I'm not going to call anybody out. I want to be a unifying figure. I'm so sick and tired of the bickering that we see in Washington state capitals around the country. I understand that compromise is the bedrock of democracy. And I think I'm a little bit different from a lot of the Democrats in that I truly believe in fiscal responsibility. It's my generation that's going to shoulder the debt and pay it off. Our futures have been mortgaged. I want to do everything we can to maximize the value of every single taxpayer dollar that you're already paying so that we don't raise your taxes. Frankly, one of the few taxes I want to implement is a capital gains tax because I believe that Wall Street banks should pay their fair share. But I believe that I don't want to be a polarizing figure. I want to show America what can happen when a house stands united. Like Abraham Lincoln says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Let's return to basics and give people a government for the people, of the people, by the people.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. And now Mr. Vitale.
I actually ran in 1992 in a contested Democratic primary, and it actually got kind of nasty. But I think my observation about that was that almost immediately about a third of the people who opposed me came back into the fold. During the summer, much more did. And by the end of the election, we were all back in the fold. I just think it's a process I've gone through before. I have no worries about it. How can I unite people? I actually have held a 27% Democratic seat, winning 55–60% of the vote for many years, and that means, do the math, a lot of Republicans vote for me, and that's because I act in a nonpartisan manner. I put policy above politics. It's not about a Democratic Republican thing. This has been my reputation. People know me for this. When I send letters out, I just tell them I keep them nonpartisan.
And question number 8 would be for candidates B, C, and D. But I think that this should be for everybody that is here tonight. So B, Ms. Sheehan, and C, Ms. Wright, and D, Ms. Scanlon. And if we have time, I'd go down the list. What about your candidacy makes you the person most likely to defeat the Republican nominee in November? Ms. Sheehan.
So I originally got into this race when it was the poster child of gerrymandering, when it was a swing district. And it's because I think having a strong progressive economic message that speaks to the working class, where we talk about every single person being able to support their family at 40 hours a week. We talk about everyone being able to have dignity in their life and retire with dignity as well, and increasing Social Security benefits and making sure people aren't worrying about their daily struggles. Things like getting trash off the street. One woman said to me, the government's failed me 4 feet outside my door when I see a needle in the curb. And talking about these things that are to people's daily lives. And the district has changed, but my message hasn't. But I think it's also important to remember for this district that it is what they call a D+13, or Hillary Clinton won this district by 28%. 28%. This district is really a gift, and we have the ability to send who we want and not try to acquiesce to Republicans. This isn't the Price is Right. We don't just go one step to the left of them and take everyone. This is our time to claim who we want to win and who we want to send to Washington.
Thank you. Ms. Wright? What about your candidacy makes you the person most likely to defeat the Republican nominee in November?
I am the candidate that's running for the best interest of the people. There is no PACs behind me, it's just the people. I made it this far through grassroots donations, my clients believing in me and knowing that I would do a good job to restructure our tax reform. And I definitely believe that Republicans are tired of the bait and switch tactics that Donald Trump actually imposed on them with the alternative minimum tax. He said he was going to get rid of it. He did not get rid of it. Now even the middle class is going to be subject to the alternative minimum tax. So I will be the one who would best understand the tax code and understand the main purpose of the business structure within our government system. It's not about being into politics. It's about understanding the need, understanding the tax code, which is the founding formation of our government system.
Thank you. Ms. Scanlon?
So what about my candidacy would make me most likely to beat the Republican candidate who we already know is going to be Pearl Kim? So the first thing, again, is I've worked across this region and across this district for 35 years. I've built relationships and coalitions in a number of matters. I've worked with nonprofits ranging from the 4-H Farm to the Headstrong Association that recently built another house in Swarthmore, to the immigration agencies in South Philadelphia, to school districts and teachers throughout the region. I guess the other thing is I can draw a contrast with the Republican candidate. She's a prosecutor. She's put people in jail. I've worked on criminal justice issues, and there seems to be a really strong momentum for criminal justice reform and having a more rehabilitative as opposed to a punitive approach to criminal justice. So we have people coming back into society, being productive members of society, rather than being warehoused at great cost to us.
All right. And we will go on to Mr. Arata with the same question.
Yes, I've worked as a grassroots environmental activist with Republicans and Democrats throughout Delaware County and in Chester and in Philadelphia, fighting the incinerator and fighting to protect our drinking water, fighting against things like the proposed ash dumps. So I've worked with people of all backgrounds and people of all groups and people of all ethnic and social classes, and we've accomplished a lot in our grassroots environmental activities. I've worked with people. Everyone cares about their public school education, and that middle-class families cannot be crushed with student loan debt. And people care a lot about the funding of the elections, and that the politicians are not bought and paid for by special interest. So these are things that I've worked on, these are things that I'm speaking out on, and I think that we can bridge across the line to Republicans and Democrats in the voting among the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. Ms. Lunkenheimer.
I don't think we should take for granted that the Republicans didn't try to put up a nominee that might have a chance of winning in this district. I mean, they chose a female state prosecutor who apparently was associated with sex trafficking crimes. I don't know her exact role, under a Democratic attorney general, and also is from a community of color. So I don't think we should take anything for granted, and they've nationally said they want to fight for every seat. So I think some of those things overlap with me. Obviously, I'm female. I was a federal prosecutor, which gives me familiarity with the federal laws and gun safety and opioid epidemic and keeping seniors safe, some of those things that are so important to this district. But I also come from a diverse background. I am married to a woman and have 3 children. But more than that, I have actual real experience with the federal rules and regulations around Medicaid and Medicare. I have real experience with pre-K educational programs. I have a social work degree, and I really have experience that, for whatever reason, in this moment, in this time, overlaps with the issues most important to this district, which are similar to those that Congress needs to deal with.
Thank you. Ms. Davidson.
I know a little bit about beating Republicans. As the first Democrat in my district, you haven't lived until you've had 18 mail pieces at your door calling you everything but a child of God, having your picture looking like you're behind bars, and that, you know, just TV ads with you and shady figures and, you know, rats around. And I don't know what I had to do with rats, but anyway, that was in the commercial. So I know a little bit about how dirty the Republicans play and how nasty they can be, and still beating them by taking a message of economic reform and taking the message to the people and letting them know who I really am. And I think you can tell that I'm really authentic and I really care very deeply about people, and that comes across when I'm talking to them. So they won't believe the lies of the Republican Party, that they'll believe that they have a true champion that they can send to Washington, and I know how to get that message across.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Ms. Lee?
Well, this has got to be the first time in American history in which 2 Asian American women run against each other in a House race. If anything, you should vote for me just because it'll be really interesting to watch. And I think because of our shared background, I can roundly criticize her policies without anyone accusing me of playing the race card. I can neutralize her, but actually from a practical standpoint, because we cannot afford to have a Republican in this seat. I represent everything that President Trump doesn't like about our country. English is my second language. I'm the granddaughter of illiterate rice farmers, and I'm a first-generation American. I want to show America that immigrants love this country just as much as everybody else. We're not here to take, we're here to create and to build and to nurture and to grow this amazing country. I also think we need a new generation of leadership, especially women. 18 members of Congress, 2 senators. How many women? 0.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Vitale, I haven't forgotten you.
You know, I'm going to run on my record. I've lived in Delaware County my entire life. I have been in the public realm for over a quarter of a century, and I have a reputation. I have been a reputation for independence. People know it's not about Democrats and Republicans with me. They know it's about good public policy. They know that I'm focused on the issues. I have criticized publicly Governor Wolf, my own Democratic leader, and others when they deviate from good public policy. I'm simply going to run on my record, and really it's not about beating Republicans. It's about winning the election and then working together with everybody, and that's the way I've approached my job.
Thank you, Mr. Vitale. Well, that's it for questions, and I think they've all done wonderfully well. So before closing remarks, can you please give them some applause? Thank you. Now the candidates will have 1.5 minutes for closing statements, but I do have a request from an absent candidate to have his representative make that 1.5 minute closing statement on his behalf. So, Mr. Laser's representative.
Thank you so much. Rich really wanted to be here tonight. He couldn't make it in time, unfortunately. So I'm here representing him. Rich Laser is the candidate in touch with working class Americans. He has been working with Mayor Jim Kenney in Philadelphia since he was 13 years old, when he started volunteering for him when he was a councilman. He went on to run in his campaign and came in his administration as the deputy mayor for labor. In that position, he is the individual who got the teachers a contract after 5 years. He got the unionized workers in the airport, which are largely workers of color. He got the SEPTA strike ended. He's the one who's negotiated these deals, which to me speaks of someone who is respected, cares about working people. He's been endorsed by most of the major labor unions in Delaware County and Philadelphia. And he is really the candidate for working families and for economic stability for Americans in these districts. I'm supporting Rich Laser because I believe that he is right on the issues. First and foremost, he's for women's health care autonomy. He's for a $15 minimum wage. He's for Medicare for all. He's for rights for LGBT people and sanctuary cities and immigration reform. He's right on all of the things. But we all agree on a lot in this field. And to me, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to hold your applause until every candidate has given his or her closing remarks. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes, and we're going to reverse the order, so we will start with Ms. Lee.
A really smart man, Albert Einstein, once said, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results." In order to change and heal our country, we have to have a different Congress. We have to have someone who's not bought, who's not beholden by the special interests. I want you to be able to talk to me without going through layers of staff and paperwork. Public servants serve at the end of the day, you know, and you don't have to write me a $2,700 check just to have access. We've institutionalized bribery. America, for me, is more than just a country, more than just a geographic location. For me, it's a beacon on the hill. It's for me, the greatest living experiment in the world, just like the Constitution is the greatest living document in the world. I want to do everything I can to keep this flame alive. That means not resting on our laurels. That means having Medicare for all, because every single one of you deserve access to high-quality and affordable health care. Being a woman should not be considered a pre-existing condition. The government should negotiate on our behalf to bring down drug prices, because you should not be paying $100,000 a month for medicine. That is out of this world. I want you to be able to walk down the streets of Delaware County and not have to worry about getting shot, and drop off your kids and attend church and not have to worry about your safety. America can do better than that. And also, we have to get money out of politics. I feel like we're selling our democracy in bits and pieces. Our democracy was hijacked long before Russia got involved by special interests. Thank you. I'm Lindy Lee. Please vote for me on May 15th.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Ms. Davidson.
Thank you. When I first ran for office in 2010, during the biggest red wave that this country had seen, I was one of only 11 in the country to flip a Republican seat. I was the only one of 2 in Pennsylvania to flip a Republican seat. All the political pundits told me that it couldn't be done. I didn't have the right look. I wasn't the right gender. I wasn't the right person. I didn't have the right pedigree. But day after day, I talked to people and told them my story and told them that if they elected me, if they honored me and blessed me with their vote, I would work every single day to fight for them. Every single day. I would wake up thinking about them, and I would go to bed thinking about them. Because that's how I've spent most of my life, fighting for people so that they could have their best life, whether as a journalist, as a nonprofit founder, and going as far away as Montana to get Barack Obama elected to office. And so, if you would bless me and honor me with your vote, I know that I will fight for you every single day for the things that I've talked about here today, for economic justice, so that you can have the opportunity to live your best life. That's the only reason I'm in this race, and that's what I'll do if you bless me and honor me with your vote.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Ms. Lunkenheimer.
You all have a very important decision in front of you. We need to flip this seat. We need to flip this House. And why? We need to protect Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We need to pass sensible gun laws, which we need the partnership of Democratic leadership and advocates and community advocates to do so. We need to fight to make sure we really, truly put our best resources at defeating the opioid epidemic. We need to pass universal pre-K. We need to fully fund our schools. And we need to think more broadly about a better healthcare system. We need somebody who has experience with the federal laws, whether it be on healthcare or whether it be with the things that keep our communities safe. We need to have somebody who looks at the world with the eye of a social worker and will think broadly, because what we're doing right now isn't enough to make all of our communities feel safe. And we need a fighter. I was an All-American women's rugby player. I don't think you're allowed to tackle anybody in Congress, but I do know how to do it. But this is a really important time, and you have to make an important decision. And there are so many of these issues that are facing our district. They really are. This is a microcosm of what's facing the country today. And just as it would happen in this moment, in this time, the experience I have in my career allows me to start on all of those issues truly from understanding the federal laws and the regulations that are so complicated, but is so important to make a difference on. So I would love to earn your support. Ashley Lunkenheimer, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Arata.
Yeah, it's a very important choice, and taking back the House starts with us. We are going to turn this blue. We have a +13 advantage. Whoever you choose in this primary is probably going to be your congressperson, and you have a wonderful panel to choose from. Every one of them has their strengths. Every one of them would be a wonderful congressperson. So what makes me different? Well, I'm the only teacher up here, really the only person grounded in middle class, working class situation, and I have a background in environmental activism for 30 years in all communities in Delaware County. And I had 20 years business experience in the private sector. So these are unique qualifications. And I do not take PAC money. I'm not a big money candidate. I am not collecting money from lawyers who represent Sunoco, or lawyers who represent the payday lenders, or the lawyers that represent the big pharma, which caused the opioid crisis. I am not taking PAC money from my mom. My mom's gone, unfortunately, and I wish she was very wealthy, but she's not. This race should not go to who has the wealthiest parents. It should not go to who is getting supported by the biggest boss in the Philadelphia area, who gives millions of dollars to one candidate, and so far has given $500,000 to one. That's not democracy. That's not my vision for democracy. I'm sure it's not your vision for democracy. So I will bring change to our democracy. I will clean it up, and I will bring equal funding for education to all, and we will enforce the Clean Air Act, we will enforce the Clean Water Act, and we will lead on climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. Ms. Scanlon?
I said at the outset that I was steeped in sort of the lore of the Kennedys, and particularly Robert Kennedy. So I've approached my life in public service with the viewpoint that the way we treat our children is the future of our country, whether we provide them with a good public education, and I've devoted a lot of my life to public education, whether as a mentor, developing programs in Philadelphia public schools, working on our school board. But then the character of our country is how we treat people who don't have power. So whether it's immigrants or seniors or women or children or the LGBTQ community, and that's the work I've done as a public interest lawyer. So I've seen the impact of policy on individuals, and then I've worked to build coalitions and change the law where necessary, whether with class actions or proposing legislation or working to get it passed. So that's what I'd like to continue to do. I believe I've got a proven ability to work across the aisle, and that's what we need in Congress at this point. I was on our local school board for a decade and moved from a board that had meetings that went until midnight because nobody could agree on anything. When I was president, we were able to actually get things done, work across the aisle, build coalitions, even though we had people with really diverse viewpoints. So I'd like to continue that work on behalf of everyone in the 5th Congressional District, and I hope I can earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Wright?
There are a lot of reasons why people are running for this 5th congressional seat. Some are so power hungry that they're willing to abandon their Democratic constituency and allow a Republican to replace them. Some are so power hungry that they're willing to spend millions of dollars in an attempt to buy a seat and undermine the democratic process. Some are just bored and don't have anything better to do. But I am the candidate who's running in the best interest of the people. Aren't you tired of the bait and switch tactics? Aren't you tired of the program to say we'll fix it now and worry about it later? We need proper planning. We need projections 20 and 30 years out so we won't be in a demise. Right now, we're in that state of demise. As your congresswoman, I will protect the middle class by fair and equally structured tax laws. I will restore the itemized deduction, bring back the first-time homebuyers credit, and provide 100% transparency in our tax spending. The only way we can do this is if you vote for me on May 15th. Teresa Wright, the right choice.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Ms. Sheehan?
I got into this campaign a year ago when it wasn't looking so easy, when I thought I was going to be going up against the most funded Republican incumbent if I was fortunate enough to win the Democratic primary against a different cast of characters. And I got in to build a movement. I got in because I thought that's what was necessary to turn our country blue when this blue wave wasn't such a sure thing yet. I got in and I focused on down ballot races. I didn't take the oxygen out of the room for myself. I went out and canvassed every single weekend through the 2017 municipal races to make sure we were building a blue wave. And I think that we really can be the change we want in the world right now, especially with this district. Now that it is such a Democratic advantage, we shouldn't take it for granted, but it's an opportunity to be what the people want. 90% of Americans are fed up with money in politics. That's really our route to victory. It's by saying we're not going to take it anymore. Martin Luther King said that those who do philanthropy are doing good works. But really we need people who are going to I'm paraphrasing, but disassemble the structures that make that philanthropy necessary, the oppressive structures, so that it's not necessary anymore, so that people can uplift themselves. And that's what I'm committed to. I'm committed to dismantling the system in which you don't have the same pull over your legislators that someone very wealthy does. Making sure that we have public campaign financing, so every single person can contribute the exact same amount to campaigns, so that we can move all of this legislation forward that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. Mr. Vitale.
Thank you. These candidate forums remind me in some ways of a spelling bee, where the better candidates memorize the talking points and do well. What I've noticed in Harrisburg is once legislators get there and political pressure is applied to them, they really just don't put their money where their mouth is. On the issue of transparency in government, we all are for that. But when the House rules were changed to reduce your transparency on January 3rd, 2017, I was the only legislator who tried to amend that bad set of rules, and it cost me my committee chairmanship 2 days later. With regard to campaign finance reform, we all talk a good game, but I put the campaign records of Speaker Turzai and Scarnati and press release the fact how much they're taking from the drilling industry. Nobody else is doing that. Criminal justice reform, we're all for that. 10 years ago, I was arguing against mandatory minimum sentencing. The sole vote, vote after vote, year after year. That's what you need, the environment. I was the only Democrat who voted against that very bad Marcellus bill that would throw the DEP under the bus. I think what you need is someone who has the strength to resist the pressure, even of their own party, when they put politics above policy. And if you send me to Washington, that's what I'll do.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think you all did wonderfully well. And now I'm going to ask our Cabrini representative to come up and give us some final words.
Good evening, everyone. Just real quick, this due to the incredible effort and talent of Kathy Youngman. This video will be posted relatively soon, but you can also go to www.vote411.org for additional information. As somebody who grew up youngest of 5 in Delaware County, you know, where I grew up in East Lansdowne, we used to say bread and dead in Delco. We have a little bit of a chip on our shoulders, and you know, we were always taught somebody pushed, you pushed back. And whenever you saw a problem, you stepped up, you didn't step out. So I wanted to thank all the candidates today, regardless of what happens in 2 weeks. Thank you so very much for stepping up to fill the void and to lead Delaware County as a whole again, forward in this country. And last but not least, to the League of Women Voters, to have one candidate and still be on time is crazy, but we accomplished that with 10, or 8, excuse me, 8. So thank you very much, and safe travels.